And you're watching NewsX World, the Eurozone. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming out of the continent this hour. President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is ready to work with the United States on their vision for ending the war with Russia. The comment comes amid reports of a draft peace plan requiring big concessions from Ukraine, which Kyiv has responded to with cautious diplomacy. A Russian strike on the city of Zaporozhye kills 5 people and injures 3 more, the regional governor has stated. Images show buildings in flames and streets covered in debris after warnings of a guided bomb attack. Russia's military chief tells President Putin that its forces have captured the Ukrainian city of Kupiansk, but Kyiv says the claim is false. Ukraine also rejects Russian statements that Moscow has seized large parts of Pavlovsk and Vovchansk. A UK COVID inquiry finds a toxic and chaotic government culture delayed action and led to about 23,000 avoidable deaths. The report criticises Boris Johnson's indecision and rule-breaking inside Downing Street, calling his leadership deeply flawed. Authorities in 7 countries arrest 35 suspects after dismantling a criminal network trafficking thousands of stolen cultural artifacts across Europe. Prosecutors say the group operated for 16 years and laundered over $1 billion through its antiques smuggling operations. President Vladimir Putin visits a Russian army command post as Moscow presses its offensive in Ukraine, receiving briefings from top officers. The Kremlin does not say whether the site was in Russia or occupied Ukraine, describing the meeting as part of his frontline oversight. Bulgaria arrests 35 people in a major operation targeting a network trafficking cultural goods across Europe. Police say thousands of artifacts and more than 50 antique firearms are seized during 131 searches. Archaeologists in Budapest have uncovered a well-preserved Roman sarcophagus dating back 1,700 years. The sealed coffin, discovered in a former Roman settlement, contained an intact skeleton and dozens of artifacts, offering a rare glimpse into life of ancient civilization. Those are the headlines of the hour, and we start with Europe's defining crisis, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that after talks with a top US Army official, he is ready for honest work with Washington on a plan to end the war in Ukraine, while European allies pushed back against punishing concessions to Russia. According to the US-backed plan, Kyiv would be required to give up the entire Donbass region and significantly downsize its military, conditions long seen by Ukraine's allies as tantamount to capitulation. The plan makes several concessions to Russia, including that Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk will be recognized as de facto Russian by the United States, and that Ukrainian forces will withdraw from part of Donetsk that they control. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry has stated that Moscow has not officially received any peace plan on Ukraine from the United States. Okay, joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He is a Russian affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much, Gilbert, for joining us here on NewsX World. Zelensky has said that he's ready for honest work on this US-backed framework. From what we've just read, do you think this is something that both sides will concede to, given the fact that Zelensky has reiterated time and time again that territorial concessions are off the table?
I think that Zelensky has a gun to his head, held by the United States. He doesn't have a choice but to accept this plan. The United States will be offering him an off-ramp, a way to leave power and live. And that, I think, at this moment must be paramount in Mr. Zelensky's thinking, because the war is coming to a conclusion, as we see from the capture of Kupiansk, which we'll talk about shortly, and by the virtual loss of Pokrovsk. these are just names that don't say very much to the broad public. But let me just say that Kupiansk is the city of 40,000 people that is the protector of Kharkiv, nearby 40 kilometers away, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. It is a strategic hub for logistics and for supporting the front there. Therefore, the capture of Kupiansk jeopardizes entirely the Ukrainian presence in the northeast of the country. The capture of Pakrovsk, or Krasnoyarsk, as the Russians call it, is a much bigger loss for Ukraine. It is a city of 400,000 before the war, and it is the key support and fortress for Ukrainian army groupings in the center of Donetsk. With that fall, the Russians have a clean sweep, virtually a clean sweep to the Dnieper River, meaning that under the terms of this proposed 28-point peace plan, the only difference is that if the Ukrainians refuse, the result will be the same. They will lose the Donbass in a matter of weeks, and at the cost of many tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and thousands of Russian soldiers. So it's a question of time and just accelerate the reality that's before us. This peace plan is opposed by everybody.
Yeah.
You've spoken about concessions from Ukraine, but the peace plan requires concessions from Europe, from the Russians, from most everyone involved, including the United States, because it covers a lot more than Ukraine.
Yeah, indeed. And Gilbert, of course, EU leaders have called this plan capitulation. What are your thoughts on that statement? You've said that all sides seem to be ceding from this deal. Who is getting most of, who's worse off if this deal were to be agreed?
Let's say who's best off. We, the people of Europe, are best off, because this type of solution will end the war in formation in Europe today. The European leaders are against it because 24 out of the 27 heads of state and government in Europe are warmongers. They want to stay in power on the strength of mobilizing assets of the country for purposes of building a war to take place with Russia in 4 years from now. That is what is jeopardized by this peace plan.
Yes, Gilbert, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the conflict. And the chief of Russia's general staff claims that the Russian forces have taken control of the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kupiansk, although Ukraine's military has denied the claims. Ukraine has also dismissed Russian statements that its forces had taken over large ports of two other towns, Pavlovsk, a logistics hub it has been pressing to capture for months, and Vovchansk near the Russian border. This comes as Russian forces have been engaged in a slow westward advance through the Donetsk region as part of their campaign to capture all of the Donbass, which is made up of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Russian forces have also made recent gains further south in the Zaporozhye region and currently hold about 19% of Ukraine's territory. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry says that 33 Ukrainian drones had been intercepted and destroyed over 5 Russian regions, Crimea and the Black Sea, overnight, resulting in suspension of operations at 8 Russian airports. Gilbert joins us once again. Gilbert, of course, some rivaling information here, as per usual. What would Ukraine stand to gain in denying claims if Russia has captured its territory here?
Well, Russia has been capturing territory every day, and the audience is maybe forgiven for not understanding the difference between the capture of Kupiansk and likely also of Pakrovsk. It's quite different in scale from these other reports every day of this little town, that little settlement having been taken by Russian forces. These are of strategic importance, and they constitute the pincer that is now enveloped Mr. Zelensky, and which threatens his life and his tenure in office. The Americans are offering him an exit with a vote a vote to take place 30 days after conclusion of the peace treaty. That will be his peaceful way out, and he can secure a comfortable life for himself on what he's stolen from the United States and the rest of his supporters over the last 3 years. Otherwise, he will probably be lynched if he stays on in Ukraine. The capture of these cities is of great significance because it is the second side, I say a pincer. On the one side, you have the Russians with these convincing wins. On the other side, you have the corruption scandal that broke out last week and completely undermined any authority or credibility that Mr. Zelensky had with his supporters at home and abroad.
Okay. Of course, Moscow wants a political freeze here. If Russia did truly have this momentum, which reports out of the Defense Ministry say it has, why is it pushing so hard for this political freeze? Doesn't that suggest exhaustion in these circumstances?
Nothing of the sort. What it suggests is that Russia's primary concern when it launched this special military operation has been properly addressed by Team Trump, namely to redefine the security architecture of Europe to secure everybody, not just the NATO members, but also the people on the east of NATO, so that there are no confrontations that can lead us to a war or that can justify the remilitarization of Europe at the expense of all social benefits, medical provisions, and the welfare of the people in this continent. It is a global solution. It includes renewal of the START Treaty. It includes a conclusion of a non-aggression pact between Russia, Europe, and the United States. That is of decisive importance.
Yes.
So to call this only a peace plan for Ukraine is to miss the whole point of what Team Trump has achieved.
But Gilbert, what we can agree on, however, is the US and Europe seem to be divided here. Do you think that this emboldens Russia for further maximalist demands again?
You say Europe is divided. What Europe? These leaders of Europe who have...
Europe has called this plan capitulation, is what I'm saying.
Yes. The two are divided, and Europe will lose. The United States has the upper hand in this. The United States began this mess, and the United States is trying to clean up this mess.
Okay.
And Europe is now just watching.
Okay. Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. Pleasure to have you on the programme. We have some breaking news coming in from Asia, and an Indian Tejas fighter jet has crashed during the Dubai Air Show. Thick black smoke was seen rising from the crash site near the airport, prompting panic among onlookers, including families with children who had gathered to watch the show. We're running those visuals for you now. There are no reports of any casualties yet, but according to onlookers, the pilot did not get ejected before the crash. We'll bring you all the updates in regards to that situation as it unfolds. But back to European updates. Now we move over to the United Kingdom for our next story, and a new inquiry into the UK government's handling of the pandemic in 2019 has now been released. The inquiry reflects the shortcomings of authorities. The report has criticised the government's lack of urgency during the early days of the pandemic, and the United Kingdom was one of the worst hit countries in Europe, with more than 226,000 people having died from coronavirus in Britain since the start of the global pandemic in early 2020. The inquiry chair, Heather Haylett, has said that there was a serious failure by the government to appreciate the level of risk and the calamity that the UK faced and the need to inject urgency into the response. According to the 800-page report, if the first lockdown had been imposed earlier, it could have prevented 23,000 deaths in England alone in the first wave. Johnson, who was Prime Minister at the time and was from 2019 to 2022, has been particularly criticised on various fronts for the pandemic response, including a lack of preparedness and failing to have enough protective equipment for frontline staff. Before we dive into the discussion, let's take a look at what the COVID-bereaved families had to say about the revelations made in the inquiry.
From the inquiry is clear. Boris Johnson is blamed in black and white for the catastrophic mishandling of the pandemic.
I very much found today emotional. My mummy died on the 24th of March 2020. And the church made it clear that had a lockdown been a week earlier, people like my mummy would have been saved.
Things like Cheltenham races and other events went on in this country when other countries went into lockdown a lot quicker. But they didn't do things the way they should have done. They made the rules and they broke them, which is heartbreaking.
Mark Sutherland joins us now. He's a geopolitical commentator and he joins us live from London. Mark, it seems so far away now, but one seems to forget 224,000 deaths in the United Kingdom. Of course, Boris Johnson's government at the time was a recipient of much scrutiny. However, this COVID inquiry delivers some further. What can you tell us? Let's go back. And what can you tell us about the situation with COVID in the UK? How it was handled by the Conservative government that was in power at that time, and in particular with Boris Johnson at the helm?
Thomas, good to be with you. So let's go back in history. We're discussing 2020. In March 2020, on the government website, there was, and I think it still is, a piece of paper, a report there that downgraded COVID-19 from a highly infectious disease to a not so highly infectious disease. Then within days, Boris Johnson then announces a lockdown after believing in herd immunity. Now, I hear what you're saying in regard to reported cases of 227,000. And I'm sure that a number of those people, any deaths are awful, and I have utmost sympathy. My heart goes out to those people that lost relatives. But also, on the other hand, I have to put my cards on the table and say that some of this information has to be looked at under a microscope. You give those figures. Did those people have other COVID mobilities that then contributed to this? If we go back further, in the previous year, there was these Chinese Olympic Games. We then lead up to an event 201 in New York, where they are basically, you could say, it looks like they are wargaming this. People need to go and have a look at all of this. The reason why I am saying this, and it's alluded in the report, which is the amount of destruction it then brought to the UK and brought to the economy of this country, and hence one of the reasons why we're in a mess right now is because of that, Thomas.
And Mark, we go back to 2020. Of course, if you can remember, Europe was imposing lockdowns. We were one of the last to do so. You can go back and look at the Conservative government's handling of all the scandals. Partygate, that disastrous tier system that was imposed. Of course, this has delivered some brutal criticism of that government's decision-making. What does that tell us about Boris Johnson's leadership, but also Britain's institutional readiness for major crisis?
Well, the other thing is that respectfully, we have to look behind what is this? What is going on behind within our institutions? We remember Boris Johnson standing there night after night with witty and balance to the left, to the right. You then have to look at the Gavi, the Vaccine Association. You then have to look at the business deals that are going on behind. There is also this whole thing of germ theory v. terrain. It comes back down to this, the definition of a vaccine. How good are they? What are they there for? When it goes against humanity's inbuilt body, which actually stands against this from a scientific point of view. Our immunity, our natural immunity. What it then said is, you then look at the scientific advisory group. You then had people on there, people like Susan Mickey, who were a member of the British Communist Party. Why am I raising all of this? This is very, very important. because if people do the homework, they will then realize were there other nefarious forces behind this to then shut countries down and then to create the economic mess that we are now in. We look at the Swedish model. They didn't shut down. And frankly, as the reporters come out and said, in regard to the shutting down of schools, it was unnecessary in the UK. And that is also part of the report as well, and all the damage that it had done to children's education, etc. Thomas.
Okay. Yes, Mark, we could discuss this for hours, but we have run out of time. Do stay with us as we have further information coming out of the United Kingdom up next. And the UK's Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has announced important changes to the immigration system of the nation. The leader has stated that it will now take longer for most migrants to qualify for settled status and citizenship in the United Kingdom. The moves are part of a wider shake-up intending to reduce the number of illegal migrants coming in to the UK. Critics, including some in Mahmood's Labour Party, are saying the changes are unfair to genuine asylum seekers. The baseline qualifying period for settled status will move from 5 years to 10, with those arriving illegally having to wait as long as 30 years, though it will be possible to wait less than 10 years based on criteria such as income, language, skills and profession. Speaking in a more personal capacity, Mahmood says that as the child of migrants herself, she feels it is important to show that the immigration system can still work for those who come here to contribute, play their part and enrich our national life. That is a quote from Shabana Mahmood. Let's take a listen into it in full.
The starting point for settlement will move from 5 years to 10. To ensure this is earned, new criteria will be added, which will act as a disqualifying bar for those who do not meet them. Firstly, the applicant must have a clean criminal record. Secondly, they must speak English to A-level standard. Thirdly, they must have made sustained national insurance contributions. And finally, they must have no debt in this country. Those paying the higher rate of tax could qualify at 5 years, while those on the top rate could qualify after 3, the same as those on global talent visas. Those who work in a public service, including doctors, teachers, nurses, would qualify after 5 years.
Mark joins us once again. Mark, of course, this plan has been controversial within the Labour Party and, of course, the left-leaning individuals of the UK. However, of course, Reform has been surging in the polls. Their main policy is to tackle immigration. Do you think this plan is enough to calm that debate, to satisfy those who feel, of course, very strongly about immigration into the United Kingdom? Of course, this plan from the Labour government has received endorsement to that of Farage, of even Tommy Robinson. What are your thoughts on this situation overall?
I can't comment on whether Farage has endorsed it or dear Tommy Robinson has endorsed it because I haven't seen those reports. But what I will say is that many people in this country, for consecutive governments for many years, have asked governments to address this issue. And as you are fully aware, we have thousands of people coming over illegally over the channel. So it's all very well the Foreign Secretary talking about that, but they will not, this government will not deal with that. As soon as they came into power, they scrapped the Rwanda plan that was put in place by the previous government. I also have to say this, that Boris Johnson, of course, in the headlines for other reasons, but Boris Johnson also allowed the biggest growth in regard to legal migration that this country has ever seen. So that has to be put on the table as well. If the Labour Party are just cynically worried about their own political future, well, they then should be, because if we had an election tomorrow, I don't think that they would be here. But the issue is this, is that one of the reasons why, including the Brexit vote, We are an island, and we are not protecting our borders. In regard to legal migration, how people come in, yes, good. Let's have a shake-up. But there are many people in this country who are here right now illegally. And the other thing is that when we see particular crimes then undertaken as well, and there may be that link between people coming over here illegally, then those people need to be arrested and deported straight away.
Okay.
And as much as that may be an unpopular thing to say, I see it moving the chairs on the ship of the Titanic, just to then for political expediency, Thomas, in my humble opinion.
Yes, Mark, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get your point of view on these matters. We now move on to our final story of the hour, and the European Commission has confirmed that an 82 million euros for financial contribution to the Palestinian Authority following the first meeting of the Palestine donor group in Brussels, although the funds had already been pledged by 4 EU member states, Germany, Luxembourg, Slovenia and Spain, despite the efforts of the Commission to engage non-EU countries. The contribution will be funneled through PEGAS, the Palestinian Socio-Economic Management and Assistance Mechanism, which connects European funding to specific reforms and aims to monitor the final use of the money. The Palestine Donor Group was established by the European Commission to engage EU member states and non-EU countries in funding economic recovery and stabilisation efforts in the West Bank. Okay, that's all that we have time for this hour, but keep watching NewsX World for more.